The Strait will open up. You don't need a backup plan.
Today, we will conduct an autopsy of the massive, dark, and irreversible reckoning that lies behind the diplomatic illusion the news bulletins are peddling to us as a solution. April 11th, 2026. We are in the midst of that temporary ceasefire that has lulled the world into a false sense of complacency. If you look at the international news, everything seems wonderful. Diplomats are speaking triumphantly in front of cameras, stock indices are turning green. Just yesterday morning, footage even appeared on screens showing commercial ships finally beginning to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, the lifeblood of global energy markets. In political science literature, this situation is called negative peace. That is, there are no bullets flying yet, but the truly destructive tension that keeps the system afloat is right in the middle of the table. But is this 2-week lull on display truly a move that resolves the crisis? Or is it the deadly buildup of pressure from the simmering geopolitical magma beneath the surface, just before a volcanic eruption? I assure you, for an ordinary citizen on the streets of Tehran, this ceasefire is no harbinger of peace. It is a ruthless, tactical breather, granted so the state can withdraw its guns from the border and turn them directly onto its own streets, its own people. Today, in stark contrast to that diplomatic theater, the cries of civilians leaking out from independent media outlets prove, in all their raw honesty, just how deep and justified the people's anger is toward these fragile hopes. I ask you to practice sociological empathy. Imagine, bombs have been raining down on your head for weeks, your economy has collapsed, your infrastructure has evaporated, and suddenly that deafening silence begins. Why are there no celebrations in the streets? Because the street's instinct for survival is far more real than any diplomatic signatures. As the Wall Street Journal reported, a deep, dark, and extremely uneasy calm currently prevails in Iran. When you listen to this podcast, you notice that tremor in the civilians' voices. People view the ceasefire not as a salvation, but as a breathing space that the authoritarian regime will use to catch its breath, tend to its wounds, and pass the bill onto the public. When the conflict with the external enemy ceases, the witch hunt begins within. While the people wait in the streets for the next move, behind closed doors, in the regime's so-called unreachable palaces, a literal Game of Thrones is unfolding. What happens when 52 massive vacancies emerge within the decision-making machinery at the very pinnacle of a state in just a few weeks? Following the intense operations of recent weeks, exactly 52 high-ranking officials and commanders, the very pillars maintaining the power balance within the regime, have been completely removed from the system. 52 people. Please keep this number in mind. These were not ordinary bureaucrats. They were the main pillars managing intelligence, the economy, and military operations. When these pillars collapse, the roof of the building begins to crumble. And to seize the power left beneath that collapse, the state's own institutions turn on one another. This is exactly what is happening in Tehran right now. An irreparable chasm, a deep rift, has emerged between the office of the President of Iran and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, the country's true armed force, regarding the management of the war and the collapsing economy. While the civilian government declares, the economy has completely collapsed, we can no longer hold the people back, we must make rational decisions, the Revolutionary Guards, driven by ideological obsessions, perceive these warnings as treason. The principle that whoever holds the gun has the final say at the table comes into play here as well. To such an extent that, in this deepening power struggle, the Revolutionary Guards have effectively bypassed the civilian government and taken complete control of the state. This is a silent coup, friends. It is the military structure swallowing up civilian authority. However, the Revolutionary Guards' intoxication with power is also bringing about massive corruption within their own ranks. Because while the soldier fighting on the battlefield sees his commanders filling bank accounts in Doha or Moscow and engaging in political power struggles, he realizes he lacks ammunition and food. Intelligence reports coming in today confirm that serious desertions have begun within the army, that shortages of supplies have reached unbearable levels, and that the tension between the regular army and the Revolutionary Guards has paralyzed the system. How can a structure that cannot maintain its own military unity, that cannot keep its soldiers in the trenches, sit down at the table with an external enemy? The answer is very simple. It cannot. It merely buys time. And it uses that time to silence its own civilian population, who have come to realize this rot. Now take that smartphone in your pocket. Look at that small screen that connects you to the world, your loved ones, your bank accounts, and news sources. Now, imagine that screen going completely dark. Not for a day, not for 2 days. For weeks. Weeks spent not knowing who is targeting whom inside, while bombs rain down from outside. The Iranian people are currently fighting for survival inside the largest digital prison history has ever seen. The 2026 Iranian internet blackout is not merely a technical glitch. It is an isolation strategy designed to smother civil disobedience in its cradle. Why cut off the internet? Because there are no witnesses to crimes committed in the dark. The regime wants to crush even the smallest spark that might emerge on the streets during the ceasefire, before anyone sees or hears it. That is why, while regime officials celebrate the ceasefire as a victory, human rights critics and sociologists are warning that this situation could completely derail the long-awaited democratic change within the country. UN officials see the situation very clearly. International observers and UN experts are calling on the entire world to act urgently, as the human rights crisis in Iran has deepened to catastrophic proportions. And the roots of this crisis were not laid today. The disproportionate force used during nationwide protests since 2025 was merely a preview of what is happening today. Official reports from the UN Human Rights Council prove how this systematic violence has been legitimized by the state. The most horrifying aspect, however, is the guise of this repressive mechanism, that conceptual exploitation the Western public struggles to comprehend. Do you know what charge is leveled against a civilian when they are brought before a court simply for demanding their basic rights, their livelihood, and their freedom? Jihad, meaning waging war against God. Can you imagine? Objecting to a political authority is labeled as if you've rebelled directly against the Creator, and you're punished in the harshest ways through extrajudicial processes. This is the most tragic example of faith being used as a shield, as a political guillotine. The radical structure you see on screen does not represent the 1.8 billion strong Islamic world. This is a marginal group that has taken religion hostage for its own power ambitions and instrumentalized it. If you notice, no major Islamic country in the region supports this regime's policies. On the contrary, they are the ones who have suffered the most from the chaos and anarchy this structure has exported to the region for years. Those who use religion as a shield are only protecting their own seats behind that shield. While these elites who exploit religion wage power struggles in their palaces, do you know what is happening in the places where those bombs actually fell? We must speak of that silent civilian devastation hidden behind the statistics. Today, on April 10th, the very day the ceasefire began, a report published by the United Nations proves just how vast the rubble is upon which this false peace actually stands. According to this shocking report prepared by UN Women, the military escalation that has been ongoing since February 28th has leveled civilian infrastructure, schools, and hospitals. And brace yourselves. Exactly 3.2 million people have been displaced. 3.2 million lives. A massive civilian crowd leaving behind their homes, neighborhoods, and pasts to walk into the unknown. Now we must ask, what are those shaking hands at the ceasefire table promising these 3.2 million people? Will these people return to their destroyed homes just because the fighting has stopped? No. There is no shelter, no clean water, and food supplies are nearly at zero due to supply crises. As highlighted in PBS NewsHour's field analysis, the civilian deadlock caused by blocked logistics routes has turned the internal food and medicine crisis into a ticking time bomb. While the regime uses this 2-week ceasefire to repair its damaged military bases and command centers, these millions of civilians in the tent cities are left to their own fate, to deprivation, and to epidemic diseases. The price of power struggles is always paid by those who never sat at that table. If this crisis had remained confined within Iran's borders, the world might have turned a blind eye. However, this regime, which for years has funded proxy forces, terrorist cells, and regional anarchy beyond its borders, has succeeded in turning its own collapse into a global crisis. Look, right in the heart of Europe, in the UK, 10 Downing Street is preparing for potential mass protests on its own streets, not just due to security concerns stemming from the Iran war, but also because of the global supply chain disruptions and the massive cost of living crisis triggered by this crisis. When a dictatorship in the Middle East is shaken, a worker in London sees their grocery bill rise. This is the geopolitical butterfly effect in a nutshell. So, while the global economy foots this bill, what are the regime's hawkish factions, those radical groups, doing? Are they seizing the ceasefire as an opportunity to heal the wounds? No. Right now in Tehran, the regime's most extreme supporters view the ceasefire as a concession and are protesting it, physically attacking diplomatic negotiation efforts. For them, peace or diplomacy is an existential threat. We see how structures that feed on conflict devour themselves during moments of calm. But the real irony is this. While these radical groups protest the negotiations in the streets, the elite political factions in Tehran are claiming the temporary calm brought by that fragile ceasefire as their own personal achievement and dividing the spoils among themselves. The country is burning, the people are struggling with hunger and lawlessness, but the top brass are preoccupied with who gets the bigger slice of the pie. The decay of a state, the collapse of its institutions, is precisely this scene. Now let's put the big picture together and project it into the future. What do we have? A 14-day ceasefire. An army on the front lines with no ammunition, whose commanders are fighting among themselves. A government exploiting religious values and left utterly isolated in the Islamic world. A command center that has lost 52 key personnel due to intelligence failures. And most importantly, millions of civilians whose internet has been cut off, whose voices have been silenced, whose economy has been devastated, and who have nothing left to lose. For a people who cannot find bread or access medicine, the political survival struggles of the leaders at the top hold no meaning. Do you know who will be the first to abandon that shield when a belief system is used as a political shield? The people crushed beneath that shield. And when that day comes, no weapon, no censorship mechanism can stop that social explosion. The strategic moves Europe or the US make at this point will, of course, be decisive. However, it is not missiles fired from abroad or agreements signed behind closed doors that will determine the fate of this region, but the civil will rising from within those darkened digital prisons. We at the MrGEOPOL table are neither engaging in blind propaganda nor wasting time on superficial analyses. We are seeking the cold, rational, and tragic human reality behind the events. What awaits us on the 14th day of this ceasefire? How will this digging one's own grave race within the regime plunge the streets into chaos? Will those who fill those 52 vacant seats bring peace to the people, or will they tighten the iron fist even further? Your valuable insights are the most important part of this analysis. If you were in charge, how would you untangle this geopolitical knot? I look forward to your comments below. I read and evaluate each one personally. To learn the realities of the world in their purest, most rational form, free from the fog of propaganda, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and like the video to support us. I'm Charlie. Keep your mind and conscience always alert. See you in the next strategic analysis. Stay safe.